On this week's video version of our podcast, Trail Cam Radio, we have Dan Bayus in the studio. Dan recently purchased a 100-plus acre farm in Northeast Ohio, and he dissects the entire property, and we talk a little bit of whitetails. If you guys enjoy this video version of our podcast, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. And also, if you aren't catching all of the audio versions of this, be sure to head to iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to a podcast and catch a new episode every Tuesday.
Lights, camera,
follow the trail.
ready to shoot.
If you know where a deer's bedding and you know where he's eating, that deer should be dead.
Camera.
If you're passive on a deer, what you're doing is you're teaching them.
I've got $30 in the Michigan record book. Everyone but one has had at least one previous wound on his body. Some had as many as 4.
Trail Cam Radio from the guys at Exodus.
Welcome, Trail Cam Radio listeners. This week we have I guess Dan's been on 3 times, like the trifecta here. But today we're sitting down with Dan Bayus. He's local here in Northeast Ohio, Northwest Pennsylvania, so it's always good and easy to catch up with him. He's in the office today on a Monday. So how in the hell did you get? You're not working?
Well, yeah. So I'm an electrician by trade. You know that. And for the 4th of July, we've been working 4/10. So we had Thursday was our last day. We had Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and they decided to do Tuesday through Friday for our work schedule, so we could get our work, homework done and all that stuff. Some guys were traveling, so it's working out pretty nice. Super cool.
Well, one of the other things outside of this podcast we have going on, you're a Black Hat team member, which is our content team, I guess, is the easiest way to, we don't have a pro staff, don't do a pro staff here, but we've worked with Tineman, your production team in the past, and we created the Black Hat program to kind of extend the Exodus content team, I guess. Internally we work pretty hard at doing podcasts and videos and all the things that we do, but there's certainly a need there to extend that, so we're happy to have you involved, and you guys will be doing some cool projects today here, breaking down some hunts that we'll show on the YouTube channel later. But it is, what is today, July 5th? 6th?
6th.
Okay. July 6th.
I know, it's such conviction.
Yeah, July 6th. You have a pretty damn busy summer. You just
insane.
Just got a new property. Why don't you fill us in on the details on that?
Yeah, so my wife and I have been looking for the past year for property, and we were kind of looking in Pennsylvania. But what we were finding is the prices that we were willing to pay for the amount of property we were looking was just kind of, it's a little bit higher priced. So she actually was the one who found this property in Northeast Ohio, and I said, well, let's start looking more in Ohio. And we started looking and decided, what, that first one she found was actually, it's 35 minutes from the house, and let's go take a walk on it. So we did, and I'm not kidding with you, within the first 300 yards of walking into this property, I seen what I needed to see. I seen that it was all prime bedding, and it's surrounded by a bunch of big mature timber. So what I was finding is there's deer trails just absolutely littered through this thing, highways, and on those highways, I actually have never in my life, you could imagine how much property I've walked in my years. This is by far the most rubs I've ever seen in one block of woods in my life. And there's also a lot of scrape action too. So with that, it kind of tells me during the hunting season, when it's very key to my liking, that's when the deer are in there. So They're obviously using it pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the overall purchase. It's a 10-year-old clear cut. They did the entire thing, so that we don't have a whole lot of timber value on it, but there is a lot of high stem count. Good food for them, and we're obviously doing some food plots in the little pockets, and
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's that'll be the majority of the conversation today is how you're manipulating that piece, how to break a new piece down, what you're doing with trail cameras, A to Z on that piece. But before we get there, I'm sure you already have cameras out there and cameras out in your other properties. Yeah. So what kind of prospects do you have for 2020?
Well, so I hunt a property that's a little further south. It's in Columbiana County, and that's where my wife killed that big one last year, and killed a couple good deer on it, right? my plans are to just completely stay out of there, and let them have the place. I've got it manicured now. This is my 5th year manicured to make it. It was a good farm to begin with, but in the past, say, 5 years, especially the first couple, I was trying to manicure it to make the deer do what I wanted them to do and put them in prevailing wind situations to kill them. So that has been done. I'm staying out of there altogether. I know what we do have down there, and there's 7, I believe.
I think you said 9.
Okay, 9 that are 4-year-old plus that are.
That's crazy.
I'd put an arrow into any one of them. I was hung up on shank,
Oh yeah, yep.
And
yep.
I'll tell you what, man. There is one that I have in my head that I want to kill. But I'll be honest, I'm not doing that to myself anymore. It's seriously, man. I lost a lot of sleep. I feel bad. God bless my wife for staying with me. But we'd be sitting at dinner and having a conversation, and I wasn't in the conversation. I was thinking about, what is that deer doing right now? What am I going to do the first week of October? What am I going to do if I don't make it happen the first week of October? She made that option very clear and easy for me when she put an arrow through him on the opening day of season. But
she put an end to that in a hurry.
Yeah. So I do have some prospects I'm looking forward to there. The new property, we've got a couple that are decent bucks that have showed up, but nothing that really gets my heart thumping. But I'm gonna flip the script here. Now, I know you've been on a good buck. What do you got going for this year?
Yeah,
this is
kind of a ongoing saga, heartbreak story, whatever you want to call it. I know your pain about being consumed with a single deer, and like every waking moment you're thinking about the property, how to manipulate a spot. When is he here? When is he there? Who else knows about the deer, especially in my case being on public. So it's, not really a secret. I've talked about this deer before, but that deer that Cameron and I had that encounter with last year. So that last year was 2019. We picked up he was 5 years old last year.
And a stud.
Deer's pushing 200 inches.
Yeah.
He's guaranteed over 190. I don't know how much, you sit there and look at trail camera pictures and videos, and you try to rough score the deer and do different things, and he's at least 190 inches.
Right.
He's probably at 200, maybe a couple inches over, plus or minus a couple inches, whatever. But hunting down on public, it's one of those things, like, you're always in the back of your mind thinking, and like, who else is down there? And typically in those places that I hunt, it doesn't really have a whole lot of high pressure. But anyways, we had that encounter with him last year. I don't know, Cameron, how many daylight pictures do we have of that deer?
Oh, ton, like
over 100?
Oh yeah, late season especially, like from December through February, almost every day.
Yeah, I mean,
really?
Yeah.
Sounds like an opportunity to me. I didn't know that.
Not
for me, but I'm saying, like, for you, Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's in your back pocket.
No, yeah. So we were down there in February, and really it was just a scouting trip, pull some cameras, maybe, finding sheds down there is tough. You can walk 10, 15 miles on a weekend.
It's a lot of real estate.
Maybe you're picking up
and the deer density is so low.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But he was alive and well then, carrying both sides on February 22nd.
He was there
wow.
on the 22nd, and we were there on the 23rd.
Yeah.
Oh,
we
wow, okay.
He was on a different ridge, and again, in the daylight. So I had this deer pinned for the most part. And going through the summer, Cameron's been all through turkey season. Cameron's like, dude, we need to get down there and find out deer sheds. I'm like, no, we just need to stay out. Like,
I turkey hunted 17 miles from the camera. And I was like, Chad, if I kill a turkey early, like, I can just go down and get that shit.
Please let me go.
And he was like, no, man. He's like, we'll just stay out of there.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things.
Less is more.
Yeah, like, I don't need a shed. Like, I know he's big. I know everything about the deer. Like, I'm just waiting for the season to come in and kill him. So, I guess back up a little bit. Those last series of pictures that we had of him, he had like a gouge or a wound, something on his back hind corner.
Like from fighting, or maybe
I don't know, but it was long.
Yeah.
And I can show you some of the photos. It is probably 10 inches, 12
you don't
inches
think
long.
a broadhead wound.
Well, let me
Okay, I'm sorry.
Keep going here.
I'm getting excited.
Yeah, you're tying in the end of the story.
And while we were down there on that scouting trip, we found some human sign.
Yeah, which was really odd.
This is February 23rd when you went.
Yeah,
there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess fast forward, and I guess this spot's a long ways away from here, but I've been down there for so long. I know a bunch of locals, a bunch of people down there. But so was it last week or 2 weeks ago?
I think 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was June something, towards the end of June. I get a Facebook message from a guy that I know in the area, and I talked to some of the foresters and logging companies and the CO down there and the wildlife biologist. So we're gonna have a circle of communication there. But the deer's dead.
What? Hold on. Are you messing with me right now? Why did you tell me that before we started this podcast? You got to be kidding me. How? From that wound.
I don't know.
That's what we're kind of thinking. He looked fine, and he was holding his antlers late. It was February 22nd, and he had both sides. We're thinking, he's healthy, he's good. And
dude, I'll tell you what, man. I don't want to. I gotta say something. And almost every big deer that I had pinned has had a way of getting killed and taken out from under me, and a lot of them, anyways.
Target buck.
Yeah, that's the one that just came to mind. We were in there to kill him. I can't remember exactly the date, but let's just say it was November 9th, or November 1st or 2nd, whatever. It was November. And he had lived in actually a housing development across the street from the property that I was allowed to hunt. And I knew that he moved over in that general time. This was the first morning I went in to go hunt him. My buddy Andy was filming me. He ended up shooting a nice, 8-point. And we drove home, got him, pictures and did that jazz. And I get a text message from a friend of mine. It's just really weird that he was like driving by this area too. He was going to a deli that was out that way. He said, "Hey, is this that buck you were hunting?" And he sent me a picture of a buck dead on a road. And that deer was a giant.
That was a big deer.
He was insane. But there was no doubt in my mind that deer was dead. I had him figured out to the T, because he was another one of those ones that consumed me. And I had every single I dotted, every T crossed. I knew when and where and how it was going to happen.
Yep.
But he was taken by I think it was a Mazda Miata. He absolutely annihilated this car.
Miata?
Yeah. But
correct me if I'm wrong. He was on his way from the housing development.
That's when he got killed. He was coming over, and if I were there that evening, and had he not gotten hit, and he would have showed up on a cell phone camera, I would have known he was there, and I would have been in there the next morning, and I might have had an opportunity. Let's put it like that. But it's just weird how I'm sorry, man. I know the feeling. It's a deer, man, and
it is, but it's like. A deer that caliber anywhere is potentially
rare.
Once in a lifetime. Like,
right.
There are guys that kill deer like that, and they have, 2 or 3 of them. But to do it on public and in that area, like, I've been working my ass off for so freaking long and passing
Years.
like 130, 140-inch deer, trying to kill a Boone and Crockett there. Mm-hmm. And, like, the encounter last year, the deer was just 15, 16, 17 yards for 4 minutes, like just standing there.
And most people probably can't understand how didn't you have that deer dead if he was that close. But I know the backstory with that.
It's like looking back, I should have just shot him. It would have been back, maybe like liver, maybe one lung, liver, stomach on the exit.
It's a dead deer though.
It is a dead deer, and everyone, like after replaying the footage and telling people the story, and they're like, "What in the hell is wrong with you?"
That's how I felt.
And it was like the deer had no idea we were there.
Yeah.
Zero.
None.
And I'm like, just a step.
Literally one foot forward.
One step.
Yeah.
But long story short, the deer's dead.
Did it get scored?
He didn't say no, but it's as big as what I'm I mean, the pictures.
I'd like to see. Oh, you saw him. You saw
I have
actual
pictures.
photos.
I have pictures on my phone. Just like the G2s.
I can't believe you
G3s.
just dropped that on me right now, man. You didn't even get me ready for that.
No, it was
Man,
just.
that made my stomach sink for you, dude. I know the
yeah.
feeling. I'm sorry.
So now it's like, luckily, we've been putting in, Cameron and I, we've been taking a few trips to West Virginia, and we have some big deer in West Virginia, which is
nice.
In those bow-only counties?
Yeah.
South?
Mingo. Well, shit, I shouldn't even say. I'm not even going to say.
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
counties
loose
they are,
lips
but-
sink ships.
Yeah, which maybe that's what happened here. I don't know. I was pretty vocal about this deer, which I didn't think would be a big deal.
It couldn't have got killed by a hunter. It was February 23rd. We had pictures of him.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I mean, who knows what happens? But with that wound, it could have got infected.
That's
he
true.
could
It
have
been shot earlier.
He could have gotten.
Was it white like it had
It
just
was
skin or?
It almost looked like
grown over.
Yeah, it almost looked like a hair tuft a little bit. But some of the pictures, you could actually see a little bit of like a flesh wound.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
So it could have been a broadhead. Maybe.
Might have buzzed him open.
Could have been a
Maybe.
tine.
Could have been a tine.
We have a bunch of pictures of him fighting right there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know the whole story, but somebody found him dead, sent me photos. Obviously, that guy did not know I was hunting that deer. He had asked, he knows we have a bunch of cameras down there. And he's like,
Yeah.
do you know anything about this deer? And I was like, oh my God.
So he still had his
Did you
horns
tell
were
him?
attached to the head though. So it probably wasn't too
Yeah.
long after that, I'd
No,
imagine.
he sent some photos of the whole deer laying there.
Wow.
Did you tell him?
Yeah, I told him. Yeah, I told him the story, and he was like, "Oh my God, man, I'm so sorry."
Oh gosh.
Yeah,
But
that's pretty.
It is what it is. It's just it's depressing, but at the same time, it's like, you know what? It's a deer. It took me
kinda
5 years to find a
Takes
deer
some
like
weight
that.
off you though, I'd imagine.
It
I
does,
felt that in a
because-
sense when it happened to me.
We've been invited to go on some trips September and even like October, November, and I'm like I can't do anything. Like everything is revolving around that. Like nothing. Like I was considering Airbnb a place down there for the whole month of October just to have a place ready for this first couple cold fronts, because that's it. Like there's no reason I couldn't kill that deer the first couple cold fronts. I mean, I don't know. God doesn't want me to kill that deer. Maybe, I could see I already told my wife, like, when the season comes in, like, I'm not sure how much I'm going to be home. And she's like, she wasn't very happy,
No, I know how that goes.
Two kids at home.
know how
And
that
she's like,
goes.
this is effing ridiculous over a deer.
But I think it's hard for a lot of people, especially a woman, and my wife even hunts, and she doesn't understand the infatuation and where it genuinely just grabs hold of you.
Especially with a deer that caliber.
Yeah. A deer of that caliber is extremely rare, and it's still like there are 200s that get killed every year, but not by me, not by you,
right?
And it
not
is
a lot on public ground.
That's what I was gonna say. That's a whole separate thing. Is a 200-inch deer on public ground is a very rare animal.
Yeah.
I guess that's a pretty good segue into the conversation of how the work that you put in to find that deer, how now you just bought this property, and how you're going to manicure this property to hopefully have yourself another shank.
Yeah, that's the plan.
So I have a couple questions, because being young and like inspiring to have my own property one day. So you walked that property, you knew you were going to buy it. You told us why. That you were like thinking, okay, I saw what I need to see. There's a bunch of deer sign. It's thick bedding. The day you bought the property, the next time you stepped foot on the property, what was your process? Like, what was your mindset? Like, this is the first thing I need to do.
The very first thing I did was actually cameras. Yeah, and I dispersed them. I wanted to try and hit every corner and a couple like inside, so I was working from the outside in. And I also knew that I had to get in those bedding areas and kind of just see how they're using them, because we bought it. It was right after turkey season, so now in my broad scheme of things, that was like in the red time, you know, where you don't do those things. But I decided this year is the first year I'm willing to allow maybe more pressure and a different type of pressure than what I generally would do getting a property or so, so on and so forth. because I feel like that information is needed in order to
Yeah, you have to learn.
exactly in order to manicure how I want, because I try and use their natural what they're wanting, and how they're using a property, traveling, so on, and bedding, most importantly, conjunction to food. So my focus as of lately is, and I'll back up. I apologize. Then the next thing was access.
Right.
There was no access in this place whatsoever. Once you were into it, there was a power line. There's a power line that runs right down the middle of it, so you can shoot off and hit, the property, either way down it. Now, what we decided we were going to do is get a good perimeter trail put in. It's a line
Smart.
that basically says, hey, and every tree has a posted sign on it. And what we found is that there was a lot of people that were walking their dogs. There was a lot of four-wheelers, UTVs, side-by-sides, and even
Anytime you have a power line, that's like
Jeeps. There's some major mud holes on this thing, and Jeeps going down it. So while we were doing that perimeter trail, and I kind of switched it from, deer hunting to human hunting, and trying to, keep them off as much as possible. I'm going to knock on this wood here, but in the past 3 weeks, we haven't had any issues with other people.
Oh, good.
I went on every Facebook forum that was like for four-wheeler riding, and it's in Ashtabula County hunting. And I just made it known that, hey, I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm trying to, do something. My family sacrificed a lot for this property, and we want left alone. I don't want ATVs riding through. I don't want, and the neighbors around that area are some amazing people, man. Really very helpful and very down to earth. And when we would get those trespasser pictures, I didn't ask them to out anybody, but I would send it to them and say, hey, if you know this person with this white dog, would you please let them know that I'd appreciate it if they weren't coming onto the property. Right. Not since has any of these people, been second offenders. So
that's good.
We're getting that under wraps. Now, food is going to be the biggest thing. There's zero ag for, I can't even tell you, if you go on Onyx and look at the broad scheme of things, is one of the first things I do on a property. There's no food. We have the prime bedding. If I can establish the prime food, it's gonna be lights out.
Yeah.
Is that pretty rare for Ashtabula County to not be surrounded by ag?
Yes. Yeah. Ashtabula is mostly all ag. At least, I've hunted it since I was a kid. I think we all probably have in some sense. But, it's mostly all ag. But this particular piece, where it is, it's close to Geneva, Geneva on the lake, and it has so much potential. The deer density is extremely high. And there has been some giants that have been killed out of this area. So, and we're talking 3 and 4 year old giants. So if I can create an age structure, and give them the food and the nutrition that they need, then I think it's going to be really good in years to come.
Well, with the trespassing thing, I know my uncle's up there, and we've already talked about that, but just, get old Cliff Cooper to walk that perimeter with a 6-shooter.
Cliff's a good guy. Yeah. He's one of those guys, actually. Yeah. I forgot about that. You guys are related. But, he's a good dude, man.
Is he the guy that you told me the story of the four-wheeler riders? Or is that your grandpa?
That's my grandpa. So Cliff's his younger brother.
Okay.
But, yeah,
Same
apple doesn't fall far from the tree. It's there. They're two of a kind, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So you've kind of walked us through your, I guess, outside-in trail camera strategy, basically for inventory to figure out what deer are there, how deer are using that. Has that changed at all since you've bought the property and we're just a couple months away from season, or what do you?
Yeah. So we're July 6th now.
Yeah.
And if you go to my office at home, I have a notepad sitting there that has exactly all the properties that we hunt. Goals for this month, and goals for this month, right? Coming up into September. And my wife doesn't agree with them because she wants to use the property recreationally more so than I do. Yeah, and that is going to be, part of what we're using it for as well. But right now, the goals are to get as many stands hung as I can, where I know and I'm sure where as far as the lay of the land and how I'm manicuring it with food, where the possibilities of killing animals are going to be.
Like known funnels and pinch
yeah,
points.
yeah, exactly. So it's nowhere. I'm not going to hang anywhere near where it will be, in a couple years from now. And I plan on personally, I'm going to be doing a lot of when I do hunt that, I'm going to be sitting where I can see and where observations, and I'm going to be doing a lot of hanging hunts because I feel like I used to hunt out of a climber, and I'd hunt out of a climber, and then if I found a spot that was just like money, I'd go hang stands, and that's a pretty solid way of doing it because then you're not glued to one spot. And I'm not doing it in the sense of trying to locate and kill one specific buck. If that happens, that's great. I want to learn the property. I have another property that I, am planning on filling my Ohio tag on. But so the month of July, I'm establishing scrape locations. And what we've found is that perimeter trail that we did, this was not by design. This just kind of so happened to happen this way. It runs on the east side of the property for a good lick of the way. So the deer started using it, and we got a good number of good bucks that are using it as well. It butts up to big hardwoods that have apple trees and actually has oaks in it. So the bucks, what I want to do is corral them down that. They're going to be checking that downwind side of this entire big bedding area. They can gather so much information, and they're able to cover a lot of ground on that trail, right? So I'm big with big tine. I'll throw big tine all over the place, and then I'll find where the bulk of the good bucks are, and then I'll start to narrow down what areas I want to, focus on more so. In those areas, I start to look at, say, just this 10-acre piece or maybe this specific trail. Where's the best place to make it happen as far as how I'm going to be able to access and get into it? And then another thing is, you got to get back out of there too. So what's beautiful about this thing is it's perimeter trail around the whole outside of this thing. The power line runs up through it. And I might be coming in, say, from the power line based off of what the wind is and not disturbing my wind blowing into, and then coming out of it, I might have to come out on that perimeter trail or vice versa, just depending on where these I haven't learned this part of it, but where those deer are going to be feeding at that time at last light. So
But you have that option.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's going to lay out beautiful, man. And another thing that's pretty sweet about it is I found there's different herds of deer in there. If you're at the extreme, say the west side of it, those deer don't seem to bother or be up on this east side whatsoever. So we're going to have different deer, that we're hunting as well.
That's pretty big because I know we talk to a lot of guys that are hunting small pieces. Some guys are hunting big pieces, and everyone has their own take on, what size parcel they want to own or actually even hunt. And my frame of thought has always been, I want the biggest piece I can be on so I can have the most control. But then you start talking to other guys, and specifically guys that are trying to kill big deer. They'd rather have all these small pieces because they can hunt different deer herds.
Yes.
And there's more potential there, I guess, to have a bigger deer when you have those options. But it sounds like you kind of got kind of got both.
Well, how many acres are you on?
It's 116, which isn't by any means a giant piece. It's not, when you look at or consider big tracts of land. 100's not what I consider very big.
And it's pretty flat.
Yes, yeah, it is.
So
it's flat, so it's not
out.
it's not like a big hilly terrain.
Do you think because there's so much structure with the clear cuts and the power line, and there's just a lot of edge that the deer are kind of compartmentalized?
Yes, naturally. Yeah. I believe they did that naturally, and I think pressure has a large thing to do with that too. You on our cameras, it's telling me that it's actually the top left side of the property is kind of less deer quality, not necessarily less deer numbers, but there's just not the sign from this past year there that says or screams big bucks, and it's because you can look inside the neighbor's property and there's blinds scattered, and when you're walking the perimeter of the trails, I take good notice to all that. It's important to know who's doing what, and then I talk with every single person I can, and so and so back there, he hunts every single day. He's a he's one of them guys. He has a stand he goes to, and he walks and sits in that same exact stand. And you know what? Those aren't the guys I'm necessarily worried about either,
Right.
because those are the deer that I'm hunting. These bigger deer.
They know he's there.
Yep. And he's not going to kill them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's exciting. But I do feel like I have to get everything done right away, and I got to remember that this is a long-term thing, and it's I got to enjoy the process too.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and that's what it is. It's a process. I've never been in the situation to own a chunk of ground like that. I mean, I've had access in my family's own property that I've been blessed to hunt, where you can go in and kind of do some different things. But when you have full control, specifically like you said, you bought this as a kind of family endeavor, multi-use thing. So it's one of those situations where it's not a lease where you're paying for it, but it's not like you have $10,000 invested in a lease just to hunt, and
feel then like you don't know what's going to happen next year.
Right, and you feel pressured just to get as much as you can done to make something happen the first year. So
right.
Do you think it's, you've been on leased properties, you've hunted public ground. Do you feel like owning a piece is going to be more enjoyable?
I think so, because, I've always wanted, I think all of us have like a farmer inside of us.
Oh, yeah.
And I've always wanted to, I enjoy doing food plots. But here's the thing is I never know, if I plant this food plot, am I going to be able to, in years to come, use it? Or if I manicure this property exactly how I want it, will I be able to use it? And I think when we start doing these hunt breakdowns, you guys will probably see that every single property that I've walked onto, my goal is to make it better than when I started for hunting purposes. And I believe I do that. I'm pretty decent at it, let's say. Yeah, I think with this one, I just planted some trees. My wife got me for Father's Day, and this is the worst time to get trees because you're supposed to plant them in the spring or the fall. Well, they're doing well, but we have to go out there and water them.
Yep.
Well, every other day is not really a good thing for deer. They don't really, oblige to that so much. So
what types of trees?
They're Dunstan chestnut.
Nice.
And I don't know a whole lot about this. I'm sure somebody listening will say, that they know a lot more, hopefully. But they supposedly one tree will create more food, protein, good high fat content than a 1 acre food plot. So
wow.
You have to plant them together. I put the two together, and in years to come, I plan on having a lot of them. Then next year I want to move on to like pears,
Mm-hmm.
Pears are a little bit more hardy and less maintenance. They do need trimmed and pruned.
Right.
But
they drop earlier.
And they hold later too. They have different strands that will hold late, and then I'll have a different strand that'll drop like early season. Yeah. And it's exciting though, because everywhere I've hunted has probably maybe been like the longest lick is 5-6 years.
Yeah.
And then you lose access, or somebody sells, or something of that sort. So it's exciting. I guess what I'm nervous about, and I'm looking at it on the front end here, and I know my personality, is after like 4 or 5 years, I've not had access to properties very often, but the ones that I have, I lose the excitement to hunt it.
You get bored.
Yeah, because it's not challenging me anymore. And you can say, oh, well, then, just kill bigger bucks. Well, some places just don't have, any more potential than what it already currently has or what you've done on it. So I think I might, one day run into that a little bit, but
it'll be fun to see like how your wife uses it and how Jackson uses it. So that can add that excitement level down the road too. So
right. Yeah, I think I'm starting to really get into, especially since I've been hunting with Stacy and Jackson. Stacy had the fire to hunt. Jackson hunts because we, do, and he wants to make us proud.
Right.
But there's a lot of young kids who, seem to look up to me in a sense, and not like for my own glorification at all, but I love that, man. It's I remember I looked up to certain people that were big hunters, and they didn't always necessarily lead me in the right direction either. Not necessarily just with hunting things, but being a good human being.
Right.
And I want to, in years to come, start feeding into that more. It's about the next generation. And I think that, in years to come, maybe this property, or even knowing that I have that property in other properties that I, work with or whatever, maybe take some people. And I don't know everything, and I don't know that much actually, but I do know something, and I feel like, I can pass that on to somebody.
It's a big deal because whitetail hunting, like regardless of what anyone says, when you're trying to kill a big deer, it becomes a very selfish sport.
Yeah.
You're not worried about anybody else. You're trying to, maximize your gain, trying to be efficient with your time. And it's like you're always chasing your tail because it seems like there's never enough time to get everything done that you want to get done. And you're trying to prep, and you got gear, and you got the property and cameras. And it's like a rat race.
Yep.
And
chasing your tail.
Yeah, you're just chasing your tail. And for someone to, I said this a couple of years ago that I should be challenging myself to do exactly what you just said, as far as trying to, maybe they're not even new hunters, maybe they're just young hunters, just trying to mentor them. We do not have enough people in our space that do that.
No, I agree. There's a lot of guys even, that walk into my shop. I have a bow shop, Tuned In Archery, and it's small, but I do still get a lot of customers, and a lot of the guys now are Pennsylvania hunters. And, when one guy walks in and says, "Oh my gosh, like that's a once in a lifetime deer. I can't believe you got a wall of them all. And look at, oh my God, what your wife has killed. And your 11-year-old boy has killed bigger deer than me." That's sad to me, man. And I don't think that's, it might be a it might be a generationized thing, like where, they learned from their parents or their dad or whatever, their grandpa, to go to the same stand every single time and just accept everything for what it is, and not be adaptable. One of the biggest things that, I'm not good. I'm just adaptable. I'm not like, you know what I mean? Like I can sit here and tell you like that I got it all figured out, but man, I am. I'm by the seat of my pants most of the time, but I'm adaptable, and I make very educated decisions based off of what has happened to me in the past failures to get it done this year or right now.
One of the things you mentioned on a previous podcast, I can't remember, I'm pretty sure it was on a podcast. It may have been in a conversation, just a phone conversation between you and I, but you said that you want to be the most opportunistic whitetail hunter on the face of earth. And that's something that's always stuck with me. I'm like, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. Like, if the odds aren't in your favor, then they're not there.
I'm genuinely, this is me, okay? I'm not a bow hunter. I'm not a gun hunter. I'm not a crossbow hunter. I'm not a longbow hunter. I'm not a ground hunter. I'm not a climbing tree stand hunter. I'm not a mobile hunter, and I'm not a fixed stand platform hunter. I am a hunter, and I want to be able to get it done in the big woods. I want to be able to get it done in farm country. I want to be able to get it done in swamps, and I've managed to do a lot of those things. I feel like the problem with that is, like, I'm a jack of all trades too. I'm a handyman. I'm an electrician. I'm a welder. I did a lot of welding in my time. Plumbing. I'm not the best at anything either, though. So it's a double-edged sword. But being adaptable and using, sometimes it might be something I hear on a podcast. As a matter of fact, like just last year, hunting in public land, man, I said to myself, I'm like, you know what, man, this is stuff we've talked or heard about. I've listened to this, am I going to walk past this sign and go to where it was in my head is the spot? And I did. Mind you, I don't know what would have happened if I sat this real hot sign that literally was just like recent, but I refer back to what I've learned, and that might have been a failure there. So maybe next time I'll make a different decision based off of what I've learned.
Yep. No, that's I think everyone's trying to be on the fast track to be a successful whitetail hunter, but at the end of the day, like, you have to be able to recognize your mistakes. You have to go out and make mistakes.
Exactly.
Like, that's the only way you're going to learn. I mean,
There's
you can
no
listen to
one-way
all
ticket.
You can listen to all the podcasts you want, watch all the YouTube stuff, listen to Andre and Cody and Dan and Sturgis and all these people. But if you don't go out and make mistakes and then recognize those mistakes,
exactly,
like, that's it. Like, that's
and there's
how you
people
grow.
who are better fit to do that than me too.
Oh, me too.
I'm a forgetful person, and I'm like, dude, you idiot! You just did, like, this. Why did you do that? Yeah, no, I agree. But you know, those people are, like, in my mind, the sort of people I look up to as far as whitetail hunters. They're accredited, and they're you know, they've ran the gauntlet, as you say, and they've made the mistakes too. Now, I think what most people don't understand, or what most people don't know, is that those guys have gotten there because they've made more mistakes than me, or you know, so on and so forth. I'm 33 years old, and I've made a lot of mistakes. I've been hunting since I was very young, so I can only imagine, you know, by the time I'm 40, you know, where I'll be, or by the time I'm 50, and I hope I'm still around to, you know, make those strides. But yeah, that's where I'm at with it.
So let's go back to talk about the new piece that you acquired. In terms, so you have your summer plan laid out, you have your goals for each month. Going into the hunting season, when you are trying, say through your summer months, you found a target. You know kind of what's going on. You have a buck that you want to kill. What are the most important questions you're going to ask yourself to be able to kill that buck?
Well, first and foremost, you said, you know, is he even there? And like I said, there's only, you know, a couple that are, I would say, are the ones I want to kill. Those 3-year-olds. Jackson's hunting the property. Stacy, you know, she's not that picky. And if they want to shoot one of those bucks, then more power to them. But for my personal, how I'm going to go about it is, first and foremost, is he there? If he is there, then what is his pattern? Is he bedding in a certain bedding area? Is it wind, you know, specific? Because every deer is going to be a different personality, no different than you or I or Chad. And I think that learning a deer's personality is very important. So if I find a specific deer, I'm most likely going to key in on where is his bed, and where is he wanting to feed at, or where do I think he's going to feed at. And I'm not on a private piece like that. I'm not very big on pressing their bedding. I'm more big on keeping them there, and then
Hunt the A to B.
Yep, hunt the A to B and catch them somewhere in between that, and hunting the right times. So I'd have no idea what historically, you know, their patterns are, because it's going to probably change from the first week of October to the last week of October, and then from, you know, that first week in November. Some places are just absolute money in November. I have no idea what I'm walking into, but I do know, like, based off of the sign that I've seen, where these bucks are using, like, when their testosterone is really high, when they're, you know, obviously during the rut.
Because you found the rubs.
Yes, and I did what I didn't want to do, was go through those bedding areas too late in the season. I did it one time. I did what I needed to do. I'm staying out of there altogether until it's time for shed season, and I'll learn a lot more. Like, what I believe right now, and what I'm going into the 2020 season, like, in my head is going to be, will be completely different in 2021, because I'm going to learn so much more from my sits, and most importantly, those trail cameras. I'm going to have that thing completely lined with it. If I have 10 trail cameras, there's going to be 10 on that property. If I have 20, they're going to be on that property. And the reason why is, you know, one of the biggest things that I've gotten good at is learning a property quick, because next year they're going to be doing pretty similar to what they did the year following, especially a 3 to 4 year old deer. Their patterns, like, are already established. They've learned what they know, and they're not doing it for any, like, you know, chance. It's all rhyme or reason.
Yep.
So if I can figure that out, then that is, I kind of went off subject of what your question was there. I'm sorry.
I'll back it up.
Yeah. So, yeah, if I say find a good buck, the A to B is going to be the most important. And then
So
obviously,
the first question you're asking yourself is, where's he bedded?
Yep.
Why is he bedded there?
Yes, exactly. Why is even more important in my mind than where. And if you don't understand why it is, like, I'm breaking this down in my head and I'm looking at a map saying, okay, well, he's obviously, I don't necessarily have to know exactly where his bed is, but I need to know where the area is.
Right.
Because if I'm accessing it a certain way on the day I'm going to hunt him, and the wind is northwest wind, and I'm walking to that top northwest side and it's blowing into him, game over already. It's done and over with. So knowing where he is puts me in a situation where I'm able to come at it from a different angle and get close enough to that bedding but not press him out of it and catch him going to his B.
So then the B is food.
Sometimes. If it's late October, I would hunt a scrape.
Yeah.
Well, I'd want to be on a scrape that is adjoining to doe bedding, more so. And I believe that out of a buck's bed, late October to November, food is on his mind, very much so. But he doesn't have a choice. It's no different than you or I when we were in our late teens, early 20s. Like, you have such a strong drive to females, and he does as well. So he's going to try and gather as much information as he can. And a lot of times those rope scrapes that I put in, I'm going to be keying on those a lot at that property.
So your B is time of the year sensitive.
100%, yeah. Early season, there's some apple trees actually that are on one of the neighbors' properties, and I've eyed them up enough, and they look like they're starting to bud they were budding pretty good. I'm imagining they're going to have some apples on them this year, so I will be keying on that for sure early season. You
essentially created that transition area trail.
On accident, yeah.
To that food source.
Exactly, from the bedding to there. And it's now, I don't know that a big mature buck, right now there's a couple that are actually using that trail, but it's wide. It's wide enough for a side-by-side to fit down through. I don't know that come season, it's a hard-horn buck is a completely different buck than a buck with velvet on his head. And he might not feel safe, using that travel corridor that I created, but I do think the does most certainly will, because it does streamline their A to B.
I have a question, and it's a little bit off the topic, but I want to make sure that I don't forget about it. So the entire conversation is about buying this new piece, how you're manipulating the spot to maximize the hunting there while maintaining multi-use. You've talked about bedding and food. Food being really important because there's nothing else there. When you start to talk with, I guess, land managers, there's two different train of thoughts when you're designing like a whitetail parcel. There's the guys that want to define bedding around food and define the travel. Okay? So they want those deer to move, be on their feet, so you maximize, the available hunting opportunities on that piece. But then there's other guys that say, well, I'm going to put food in my bedding because I want to protect those deer, and I want to keep them. I don't want them to move around because I don't want them to go to the neighbors.
Okay.
So where does your train of thought, like what's your take on that?
My opinion, I guess is the best word. My opinion on this is that if you have the ideal bedding that the deer for mature bucks feel safe in, they're going to use it regardless if there's food right here or 2 miles away. However, for opportunistic hunting, if you were to put, and this is our case here, like I said, it was a clear cut 10 years ago. There's openings inside of those bedding areas that are like literally right in the center of the property. The access is where I'm scared of, that I don't currently have, 100% down to those, but I will be having pocket plots inside of there, and I will be feeding inside of there. And why that is, it is in the heart of the property. So if, say, on the one corner, I have a particular buck that is bedding over there, and he's by, this is early season, we're talking by 9 o'clock making it to this food source. It might be big time, it might be a food plot or whatever it is. Having him there during those daylight hours, knowing that he's bedding at A and then he's making it to B during those daylight hours is very important to me. That deer is killable. If say, he's bedding on my property and he's going to a place that's 2 hours away, I don't know what time he's making it there, but chances are he's up somewhere milling around in that bedding area, and that deer is killable as well. Not necessarily every single day, because that's not how I look at it. I'm, like I said, an opportunistic and a probable hunter. I look at probabilities, and it's more probable that a deer is going to be on his feet during daylight hours if there's a cold front that has moved in. We have like enough people has solidified this, right? Yeah. It's also more probable that like late October, that deer is going to be up a little earlier. He might be coming back to bed a little later. So that might be an opportunistic time to actually get in from that 2 mile away food source to his bed. Or, say a morning hunt, for example, which is, I've always been very against morning hunts early season. But if you know exactly where a deer is on a camera at, say, I don't know what, 6 a.m. Out on this big food plot or that you have, or maybe even just as simple as an acorn tree, and then you have, he's bedding over here. Maybe you don't even have like surveillance or camera that he is necessarily getting back to bed at daylight hours or whatever. He might be back before that, but I'm waiting for maybe that cold front. And I actually, for morning hunts, look into moon phases as well. Mm-hmm. If it is a full moon, no different than you or I. Like if you shine a deer with a spotlight, you know how those eyes shine. Well, walleyes are the same way. If you shine into the water with walleyes up on the, and I've done this with my headlamp. I used to be a wader fisherman. You can see their eyes shining when they come up and they roll. Well, there's no denying that the moon does affect feed for deer and for fish. Mm-hmm. So if we have, say, a full moon, I don't care to hunt much at all then. If it falls during the rut, I'll be hunting like late morning through midday is the most important time in my opinion, because the deer are out feeding all night long. But if that's, say, let's go back to that scenario where that buck is out here like an hour before light in the morning, and I know that he's bedding somewhere in this area. Well, if we have, say, a new moon, okay, he's most likely, going to be coming back to bed later on those days, as well as if it's cold, because he's got to have a little bit of extra love in his belly to keep him throughout that day and keep him able to lay down without, being up milling around and doing his thing. So, I try and put a lot of science, and I try to predict, and I actually predict, and I watch cell phone cameras too. My predictions are not always correct. It's actually more to the other side. But matter of fact, I'll down myself here heavily. The first day of Ohio archery season last year, it was 75 or 80 degrees out. Okay,
it's hot.
It was hot. I had a cell phone camera that what's it called, raccoon had pulled down off the tree. So I had no idea, like, that morning who was in there, if it was even,
I think
like,
I remember this.
Yeah, so, yeah. And I said, you know what, like, hey, Stacy, let's go on a date, because she's, like, adamant about the first day of season we hunt. And she doesn't care if it could be 100 degrees out or, like, a monsoon, and she's going to hunt. Because it's her tradition. Well, I don't hunt like that myself. So I told her, like, Stacey, we are staying out of here. Well, as the day's progressing and I'm outside getting all our clothes, ready and everything packed up and ready to go, I'm looking at the weather and I'm seeing, oh, wow, we're going to get a little weather front that moves through there, and it's saying it's going to drop in temperature. I'm like, this might actually work out. Well, I still wasn't enough in my stomach to go. But had we went with my initial, Stacy's pig-headedness is what killed that deer essentially, because we wouldn't have been there if it were my choice. So, right. Predictions, you can try to predict till you're blue in the face. I think sometimes when something's meant to happen, there's no overruling that with any predictions.
Yeah. Yeah, regardless, like even when we think we have something pegged and figured out, the odds of you being right are still
so slim.
Less than 10% probably. Like that's just the way it is. I think we've all been in a stand or in a situation where you're like, I'm going to kill this deer tonight.
Every time.
Doesn't show up.
Every time. My wife makes so much fun of me, man.
Because if you don't have that thought, why the hell are you there?
Well, yeah, okay. And I'm serious, man. Like, I have it in my head, oh, my God, this is going to work. This is so perfect. Just be ready. It's going to happen, Stacey. Right. And she's like, you say that all the time. Every time. And you know what? We go hunt. We hunt a lot of days throughout the year. And it does happen, generally for at least one of us or a couple of us, once or twice or sometimes more. And I'm wrong all the time. So she sees that, and she's very matter of fact. Yeah. But, I do. There is nothing in my mind. Like, nobody's going to tell me any differently that it is not going to happen tonight, And I do. I play that game with myself, psych myself.
You have to. confidence is so much of the game.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't feel confident, you might as well go home.
Yep, I agree.
Your opportunity can come, and if you're not confident about it, you're going to miss it.
Yep.
100%. Well, we're 50-some minutes in. Is there anything else you want to touch on, Cameron? I know I kind of interrupted your question.
Well, just to put a closing to that scenario, the question. So this applies to whether it's your new property or any property anyone's hunting. Just you don't have to go into grave detail about it, but like, what are the most important key factors that you're going to ask yourself to get it done? So one was, where is he bedding and why?
Yep.
2 was, where's his food source or primary food source, or like just where's his bee at that time of year?
Yeah, what's making him tick?
And what's after that?
I think one of the most important things, and you had mentioned this earlier, is hunting when it's right for the deer, not right for you. And that might mean hunting in the rain. That might mean, hunting in the morning, or unfortunately we all have to work. That's part of life. If it were an ideal world, we'd be able to sit at home and just look at the weather all day. That's deer hunters. And it would probably get boring. But if you could sit and watch the weather and go through your trail camera data, knowing when it is right for that specific animal to go in and harvest him is a big deal. And catching on to those tendencies is also another, one of the big deals. If I were to give my fifth and probably most important is the adaptability, being adaptable to this situation. Don't limit yourself to just being a ground hunter. Don't limit yourself to just being a mobile hunter. Don't limit yourself to just being a swamp hunter. Everybody has their forte, but there's no learning in doing the same thing that you've always done. There's a lot of learning in going into something new and failing, and it might not be necessarily for this year for the better, but it's better for the overall ultimate hunter. Yeah.
Yep. That's a good point. And like the moral of the whole thing is like it was hard for you to answer that because there's no shoebox answer. Chad says it all the time. It's like everyone wants you to put an answer in a box, put a lid on it, and you're a deer hunter. There's no, like, everything is so situational.
Mm-hmm.
So the adaptability is going to wind up killing that deer because everyone wants to know where he's bedding and why. Everyone wants to know where the doe bedding is or where the food is. But being able to kill him is where the adaptability comes in.
Yeah, and early season approach is going to be completely different than a late October approach compared to a
time frame.
Early November approach, and it goes really quick in November from hunting those travel corridors or downwind side of doe bedding areas to just strictly, if you're going to hunt, you need to be in those bedding areas like the second, third, and fourth. Yep, exactly. That's adaptability, that I was talking about.
That's good, I think. That answers my question.
Yeah, I think those are great words of advice. I know we have some other stuff we got to get done today, so we're gonna get this wrapped up. I'm excited to see how this other stuff that we're doing, the Black Hat Day hunt breakdowns. I'm excited to see how this stuff plays out. But before we let you go, Dan, before we jump into some other things, we got to ask you one question. We've been doing this for a couple weeks now, and I'll ask both of you guys this, and I guess I'll answer it myself. But in the last week, what has been the best piece of content that you have consumed? Hunting related or non-hunting related?
Wow.
I'll go.
You go. Yeah, you go.
I'll go.
I got to think about that.
I listened to the Hunt for Real podcast with, what was the guy's name? He had, Tim Ferriss, maybe. It was a blood tracking expert.
Tim Ferriss is like the 4-hour work week guy. Or unless you're thinking of, maybe it's a different Tim Ferriss.
I don't know if it might not have been his last name.
Gotcha. Okay.
But it was Tim something, and he was a blood tracking expert, and that was pretty eye opening.
So what was like a key takeaway? Like what was?
He was talking about the biggest thing that I took away was because it happened to me last year was the liver hit and how long, how to identify it and then how long to wait. And he said that everyone's early on it. Everyone's typically like 4 hours minimum. He said 6 to 8 before you even go look.
Interesting.
And then I'm not great at identifying blood. So he goes over talking about the different types of blood for different types of hits and
Yep.
the coloring and all that. So that was pretty helpful for me.
Dan's giving me the look. Okay.
I'm having hard. No,
I'll go. I'll give you a
You
couple
go
more
ahead.
minutes. I'm a big fan of Yellowstone. I said that in a couple other recent podcasts, and I got to watch episode 2 last night of the 3rd season. So that was my favorite piece of content consumed in the last week by far.
Oops. Right here, episode 59, Hunt for Real podcast, Tim Lewis. And After the Shot Breakdown.
That's interesting stuff.
It was a pretty good listen.
Yeah, so I listen to a lot of podcasts and I watch like a lot of YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
I think anybody can say that the hunting public guys, are very enjoyable to watch. They went down with Ranch Fairy and shot some pigs. I thought that was kind of fun and cool, and it also puts them in that it's okay to maybe go somewhere and
Hunt a ranch.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people. I'm personally maybe one of the people who I don't have any want or ambition to, but I don't look down on someone who does. I thought that was pretty cool, but I was actually on the way here. Okay, I was listening to Don Higgins' podcast, Chasing Giants, and they were talking about not penetrating a bedding area and leaving it as a sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that 100%. However, if you don't penetrate those bedding areas and you don't learn, what is happening inside of those bedding areas, and how are you supposed to key on that and use it, for you to hunt? And I don't think they mentioned this part of the whole concept is, there's a time and a place for it. And I thought that was kind of maybe a little misleading. So I don't know if someone else has listened to that. Maybe they took it differently than I, but I thought maybe that was something to elaborate on.
No, I agree with you. Like, if you don't know, then how are you supposed to fit that biggest piece of the puzzle into your picture? You know what I mean? Like, you got to go figure it out.
Right.
But
Pretty interesting. Nobody said the latest episode of Whitetail Cribs.
that doesn't even count for us, right? Like,
It couldn't count for Dan, though.
That's like a band wearing its own T-shirt. Like,
That's called biased, and I'm a Bayus, so.
Well, that's it for
biased.
That's it for this week, folks. We got some work to get done, but we appreciate everybody tuning in. As always, if you haven't left us a review, please do so. It helps us grow the ranks, and we've been growing pretty fast. Jake's made it a point to note that we've been ranking inside the top 30 or something wilderness category on iTunes. So podcasts are growing like crazy. YouTube's on fire. Make sure you guys go check that out. And I will say, if you're watching those videos, leave us a damn comment.
Yeah.
Leave us a comment. Let us know. Maybe you hate something. Maybe you like something. Maybe you want to make fun of me. I get made fun of a lot.
It helps us out, though, honestly.
Yeah,
the
it
feedback, we don't take it super personal, but if there's something that people aren't liking, I'm obviously going to change it.
Yeah. So leave us some feedback there, and we'll talk to you next week.